There's nothing quite like a bit of Nigel Farage is a hypocrite news during the silly season. Of course, news is still very thin on the ground. Of course, there is, probably by this time, again, I'm doing this on Friday morning, so it's very likely we'll have heard, we might have heard some news, of course, about what's going on in Ukraine and Alaska. So expect us to be talking about that possibly over the weekend. And if not on Monday, like I say, we're waiting for what happens. Like I say, it's happening today at some point. We just don't know when. And then what comes out of that will also be a big talking point as well. So, yeah, a lot of stuff might be suddenly be talking about, especially about European security, depending on what this happens. What on earth happened in that meeting? What's this supposed deal being done? I've said this before. Vladimir Putin basically wants and has always wanted this insane, crazy deal that he's been pushing since the beginning of the war. That hasn't changed. How can you negotiate with someone who just keeps on insisting that they get the exact same thing that they've been pushing since the very beginning? It's not really a negotiation, is it? So we'll see what happens and how that shakes up. But of course, today on Nigel Farage, because Nigel Farage is complaining about, believe it or not, new rules coming in to enter the EU, which you would think Nigel Farage would be in favor of. But because you've got to remember, Nigel Farage is a massive hypocrite. If it comes from the EU, oh, well, then that clearly must be bad. Clearly, that must be really bad if it comes from the EU. But if it's in America, oh, no, that's fine. Anyway, we'll get into this in a moment. But before we do go diving into that, please do remember to click on the like, the share button, and, of course, the subscribe button down below as well. And, of course, don't forget to ring the bell as well so you get a notification of when we go live. And, of course, as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. It is a massive help. Links down below, of course, as always, to the Patreon page, the Buy Me Coffee link, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the YouTube membership down below as well. So thank you very much to all those people who do help and support that. So let's crack on then into this. So Nigel Farage is borderline delusional. So the last, of course, possible date for the next general election is exactly 4 years away. Thursday, August 15th, 2029, to be exact. But that doesn't stop it feeling like Nigel Farage is already the Prime Minister. Migrant boat arrival numbers lead the morning bulletins. Migrant hotel protests, led in some cases by incognito reform councillors and candidates, make the evening news. And that's something I think should be called out a lot more. The fact that, reform councillors, I think there was a case in Kent not that too long ago where there were 2 reform councillors there, but also candidates as well. That should be, I think, called out absolutely. And if they ever do stand for a candidacy, be it a local councillor or he's an MP, they should be called out for that. So keep an eye on them. Anyway, the party's spurious crime statistics and, of course, uncosted policy launches have now eaten up considerable airtime, as do now the deep thoughts of Andrea Jenkins and Sarah Puchin. And that's something else I've noticed, because there's someone else pointed this out not too long ago, that you've got Luke Campbell, who, bear in mind, big Olympic boxer, gold medalist, I think it was in 2012, I think. You've never seen him come out and speak publicly. No, it's always Andrea Jenkins that seems to get the limelight, not him. And that is because he's got nothing. He's got no idea. He's got no clue. Things up in Hull and East Yorkshire are not going, shall we say, too smoothly for him at the moment, by the sounds of it. And like I say, we covered the situation where he was trying to fire some of his senior civil servants. If those go to tribunals, that could be very, very interesting indeed, if those do. But I have no doubt, of course, we'll probably get more inside information, no doubt, possibly maybe in the coming months on that. Anyway, back to this. Now, of course, police have been told to release the ethnicity and national data of suspects charged with high profile cases, a policy precisely no one in Britain was demanding before reform made it a hobby horse. There is, of course, one more sign that Farage is already running the country. He is, of course, being given free rein to talk nonsense by the Mail newspaper group, which not supported a politician so slavishly since it backed lettuce Liz Truss with Cometh the Hour, Cometh the Woman title, and of course, at last, a true Tory budget. And of course, we all know what happened with that. Last weekend, of course, the Mail on Sunday found Farage weighing in on what the paper called tough new checks for UK citizens travelling to the UK, in shape now of its new entry-exit system. On the 12th of October, all non-EU travellers will have their fingerprints and photograph taken for the first time when they travel into the EU. They may also be asked for evidence of where they are staying and, of course, a return ticket back out of the block. These sound exactly like the sort of checks a politician who is now tough on visitors overstaying their welcome, say like Nigel Farage, might support. And indeed, they sound awfully a lot like, again, the checks now faced by frequent visitors to the USA, like, say, Nigel Farage. But because Nigel Farage is a monstrous hypocrite and he told the Mail on Sunday that the plans were, of course, outrageous, insisting that Keir Starmer needs to stand up and say this is completely over the top. How on earth we managed to negotiate a deal as bad as this, I do not know. Once again, Starmer has gaslit the public. This isn't new. This entry and exit system, I believe, was like on the cards for a very, very long time. It's only now just coming into effect. And of course, because we Brexited, yeah, we are now subject to that. So, yeah, one of the things I always want to say is, Starmer and Lammy have done an excellent job on the EU reset. They really have. They've rebuilt a lot of those relations. And now, if Farage gets in, what happens to all those relations then? What happens to, like, the deals and stuff that we've got then? Is he just going to rip them up and tear them up and do what? It's generally really worrying that that could once again happen, because we've actually got an adult government that recognized that, throwing your toys out of the pram and insisting that you get your way wasn't actually a really good way to do diplomacy with Europe. Turns out that's not how it should be done. But anyway, back to this. Anyway, because Farage is also now a habitual liar, he also went to tell the paper, for all the travellers who go to France, who now have to prove medical insurance, will of course be a lengthy process. No such requirements exist in the EU's plans, but of course that won't stop Nigel being appalled by it. And yes, because the MOS wants to see now performative rage machine now elected, they didn't even bother to point out the problems with any of all of the above, of how indeed the blindingly obvious fact that none of the completely over-the-top checks would be necessary for British travellers if in the first place we had not taken the advice of Nigel Farage and left the European Union. It's like now, it is like this now, and imagine how the supine that, of course, they will get when they get their wish, and if finally Farage is in charge. And yeah, Jesus Christ, that is not a prospect I do not want. Farage in charge would be a disaster for the UK, for everything. There would be the damage he would do would be insane. Generally very bad. And to be honest, the Labour government is not doing that bad a job at the moment. They are not doing that bad a job. The economy is in a lot better state than I think people give it credit for. That is a big thing. We've had inflation come down numerous times under this government. We've had, again, the EU agreement. That is going to help things on inflation. That should help bring down prices as well. Not a lot, but it should help bring down prices. So we will see, of course, what happens and what the next couple of years bring. But Trust me, it's not all bad. This government that we've currently got now is a lot better than the previous one. You'll notice a lot of people out there just like to talk about the negative stuff, but don't talk about the positive stuff this government has done, which basically gives you the indication of they're not giving this government the fair shake it deserves. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.